9:14, everybody. So nearly half of all workers nationwide do not use all of their paid time off. That's all according to a recent survey by the Pew Research Center. So 46% of workers take less PTO than what they're offered, which averages out to 4 out of 10 people.
Wow. 52% of those who don't take their PTO cite the following reasons: fear of falling behind or losing their job, fear of returning to too much work, desire to show dedication, and being in a leadership position. So this adds up to more than $60 billion in lost benefits for workers. And if that's not enough to get your attention, we have invited business and career coach Amina Altai to explain why taking your PTO can actually help your career and not hurt it. So good morning to you, Amina.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Glad to have you here. So work-life balance, we basically threw it out the window during the pandemic, but finding any kind of balance is really tough in any situation. But you prefer to call it reframing work-life agility?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So balance implies stasis, sort of like a 50-50 split, and it's never 50-50.
Okay.
But agility means that we're sort of bouncing between the two with more freedom and movement. And so let's have agility between work and life, because sometimes work's going to require a little bit more, and sometimes our personal life is going to ask for a little bit more. So more agility versus that static balance that's rigid.
Oh, that makes sense.
Let's talk about burnout, right? Because it's a serious consequence of not disconnecting from work. You learned that firsthand as well, right? So talk about the folks who, I guess, kind of look at it and say, well, I'm already at that level. I feel the burnout. I've done it for like so many years. So why can't I just continue feeling the same way?
Yeah, I love the adage that if we don't prioritize our wellness, we'll have to prioritize our illness. And I believe that's really true with burnout. And even if we've been operating in that space, it's never too late to shift so that we can pace ourselves, rest, and recover. Because otherwise we'll tip into illness. And that was my story too. I was so burnt out that I developed 2 autoimmune diseases. And so why not actually prioritize our well-being so that we don't have to focus on our illness?
But people are being asked to work more with less.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that?
I think boundaries are really important. And so working with our managers to establish what's in our role, what's outside of our role, what we're willing to do, not willing to do, and what we'll make exceptions for, because we all want to be team players. We don't want to be so rigid that people don't enjoy working with us, but also being really clear on what works for us and the work at the same time. I love the quote that boundaries are the distance at which I can honor my work and myself at the same time, and that's true for all of us. How can I honor the work, do what's in my role, and take care of myself at the same time?
So how do you approach that mindset without looking like you don't want to work or that you're trying to do less work, right? Because if you're going to go in and say, okay, I want to draw the boundary here because this is what I've been doing at level 4,000 when I shouldn't be up there.
Yep.
And so how do you approach that conversation?
Yeah, a lot of the time with boundaries, people will over-rotate and they'll just say no. But we want to communicate our trade-offs. So if your plate's already full and your manager asks you to do one more thing, communicate that if I do this thing, the trade-off is going to be this other thing. So we're not saying no, I'm not doing anything. We're saying there's a trade-off, and we want to over-communicate around that trade-off.
I'm curious though, do you think managers should be encouraging folks to take their PTO?
Absolutely, because it's top-down, inside-out. If we don't see our managers doing it, we're not going to do it. And it leads to greater creativity when we come back from our paid time off, greater productivity. We also have better quality of life. It impacts the work and the bottom line as well if we take it.
Yeah, and people fight for it too, right? Because a lot of companies won't give the raise, but they'll say, oh, we'll give you an extra couple PTO into your bank, right? So how do you, though, get yourself into the mindset of, okay, I deserve to take it, right? Because not only the work factors, but there might be a competitor factor, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to pick up the slack and they might do a better job. So how do you kind of get over all those hurdles?
That's such a great question. I think it's really important that we understand the why around our overworking. When I was overworking, it's because I didn't feel worthy. And I felt like I had to prove myself every single day. So understanding the stories that we're telling ourselves about why we overwork and why we're not taking the paid time off is foundational and a really important first step.
So you emphasize the importance also of keeping track of invisible labor. What does that mean exactly?
Invisible labor is the work that we do that's unseen and unpaid for, and it can happen at home and at work. So at home, it could look like doing all the child care. At work, maybe it looks like volunteering to run the ERG or being the office therapist, but it's the work that's unseen and unpaid for. And we all do way too much of it. So we want to keep track.
We do a lot of invisible labor. You and I do a lot of invisible labor.
Yes.
You know, and on paper, though, in the way you say it, the conversation should go easily, right? But what if it doesn't, right? What if you have somebody who doesn't understand that you deserve that PTO and you're like, well, I'm taking it regardless. So what do you do in that situation?
One of my favorite frameworks comes from the Center for Creative Leadership, and it's the SBIS model, Situation, Behavior, Impact, Solution. So share the situation. The situation is I'm a little burned out. The behavior is I'm not able to give my all to this work. The impact is there's a breakdown in the project, and so my request going forward is this. So when you show the impact maybe on your manager, on the team, on the work product, they're more likely to understand it in the context of the organization and the work itself. And I think that's a great way to introduce it.
I think our problem is we are always just battling the voices in our head more than anything else.
A lot of voices.
100%.
There's a lot of voices.
For me too, for all of us.
Amina, thanks so much for sharing your advice with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Use it or lose it.
I'm gonna put in my vacation request now.
Use it or lose it. All right. And by the way, about that invisible work we've been doing.